welcome aboard Wellman Airlines. I am your Captain David, and today we're going to fly the mostly unfriendly skies as we take a look at airplane movies. I didn't take my first flight until I was in college, and that was on an 18-seater out of Logan Airport in Boston. They asked everyone how much they weighed as they got on the plane so they could even things out. It's the smallest plane on which I've ever flown, and that record will stand. I've been on at least 2 flights where the passengers cheered after a safe landing. I believe one of those planes was hit by lightning at some point. I'm not much of a flyer, but I have flown to Alaska, Hawaii, Ireland, and England, so I tend to make my flights count. I haven't flown since COVID, and now that I'm extremely claustrophobic and doors seem to blow off planes during every other flight, I don't see myself getting on another plane anytime soon. So instead, I watched a bunch of airplane movies to remind me of what I've been missing. Turns out, I really don't want to be on any of these flights either. There are several airplane movies I will not cover today, including Top Gun, Top Gun Maverick, Memphis Belle, Air America, Operation Dumbo Drop, Passengers, Passenger 57, Nonstop, Snakes on a Plane, Soul Plane, Firefox, Sully, and Die Hard 2. Is that an airplane movie? It's not that I didn't like some of those, I just wanted to keep today's list relatively short. And I think you've listened to me complain about Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick quite enough at this point. I also won't be including Final Destination, but that's because there is a huge Final Destination episode coming soon, so I'm going to skip that for now. That is one plane you definitely do not want to be on. We are switching gears a bit today, and we've divided these airplane movies into subgenres for this episode. Think of it as a charcuterie board of airplane movies. Since we can't ever have total chaos here at Cinema Wellman, the genres will be presented in alphabetical order. Air Wellman is owned by the same company as OCD Airlines. We will begin with the airplane action movies, which means we will be starting with the cheese course. We have 3 action films today, and they're all preposterous, especially in the way they spit in the eye of physics. All 3 are actually downright silly if you put even a bit of thought into what's happening. We'll begin in 1996 with Executive Decision. Marla Maples Trump? Wow! I was not expecting that. And boy, oh boy, does she have stories to tell. Steven Seagal's early death in this film was reportedly due to wanting him out of the production because he was such an asshole. Seagal physically assaulted John Leguizamo after declaring himself the law on the set. Leguizamo later showed up early on the day of Seagal's death scene just so he could watch him die. Halle Berry refused to be in this mess until she was offered $1 million. I hope she spent that money wisely. And I also hope she spent that swordfish money wisely. The testosterone-fueled banter is unbelievably 90s. This whole movie is. It reeks of 90s action movies. They were all cookie-cutter movies with paint-by-number scripts. The dialogue is positively laughable with so many weak attempts at humor. The hookup between the 747 and the stealth bomber, that's got to be impossible, especially since they seem to be making it up as they went along. There are a few suspenseful sequences aboard the plane, and I give the passengers a lot of credit. They were unbelievably calm and patient during most of this flight. Before the gunfire, that is. There are an awful lot of bullets being fired on this plane before a hole is blown in the side of it. Shouldn't that have happened right away? Like after the first, 100 bullets? I would have been killed by the hijackers right away due to my insistence that the beverage service cart not be interrupted. It's an Oceanic Airlines plane, just like from Lost. I love that. And the stewardess helps fly and land the plane, which is always a treat. Next, from 1997, Air Force One. Thank you, director Wolfgang Peterson. Gotta love that the terrorists are given a guided tour of Air Force One at the start of this movie. Let's make sure they are handed all the secrets about this flying fortress. Check all reality at the door for this one. IMDb tells us, quote, communist radicals hijack Air Force One with the U.S. president and his family on board. The vice president negotiates from Washington, D.C., while the president, a veteran, fights to rescue the hostages on board. Right. Once again, there are some pretty good action suspense sequences in this movie, but if you think about it for even a second, the entire thing falls apart. Gary Oldman, love Gary Oldman, we know that. Gary Oldman chews up all of the scenery on this plane. It's borderline comical. I think it actually crosses that border. Can you really fire a shit ton of bullets on an airplane without instant catastrophe? That airplane comes to a comic end. CGI in 1997 was pretty sad. Can planes do cartwheels on the surface of the ocean? Get off my plane. That was nominated for 2 Oscars. And speaking of, from 1997, Con Air. There are so many things wrong with this movie, but it has to be included in a list of airplane movies. I had to include it because it's terrible and it's compelling at the same time. This is a ludicrous mess from start to finish. There is no debating that. Terrible, awful accent on Nick Cage. One of the worst in film history. It's close to Gump. Much of this is offensive and racist and homophobic and unfortunately 90s. How on earth are all of those prisoners on the same damn plane? I mean, how incompetent do they want us to think law enforcement is? So many bullets being fired on the plane. Wait, this was also nominated for 2 Oscars? What the hell was going on in the 90s? Next, let's switch over to comedy. So, these comedies are funny on purpose, not like those action movies we just discussed. We're going to begin in 1965 with Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines. IMDb says, hoping to push Britain to the forefront of aviation, a London publisher organizes an international air race across the English Channel, but must contend with 2 entrants vying for his daughter, as well as national rivalries and cheating. This G-rated adventure taking place in 1910 is a delightful family movie filled with slapstick humor and farce. This would be a great double feature with 1969's Those Daring Young Men in Their Jaunty Jalopies. They knew how to title films back then, which is pretty much this movie, but with cars. These flying machines are great fun, and this is a colorful and breezy flight with comic pitfalls at every turn. This was Oscar nominated for Best Writing, and I get that nomination, but not all those others. Next, from 1980, it's Airplane. I've spoken about Airplane on more than a couple of occasions because it's simply one of the funniest movies of all time. Airplane spawned countless parody comedies, but none of them could ever match what Airplane did. There are so many catchphrases in our pop culture world that come from this movie, and that, of course, can measure cultural impact. One of the reasons I believe it works so well is that Jim Abrahams and the Zucker brothers cast veteran actors in key roles who had never done comedy before during their illustrious careers. Robert Stack, Peter Graves, Lloyd Bridges, and of course Leslie Nielsen are hilariously funny, especially since we never saw them in comedies before this film. Airplane should be seen every couple of years as a reminder of how parody comedies should be made. It's not an easy thing to do, that's for sure. And I can't talk about Airplane without again mentioning 1957's Zero Hour, which is the drama on which the comedy Airplane is based. Some of the same exact lines are delivered. It's absolutely amazing to watch this after seeing Airplane so many times. Abrahams and the Zucker brothers, they bought the rights to Zero Hour because they intended on using so much of the story word for word. That's a tremendous double feature if you can ever put it together. Next, we're going to move to the genre of drama, and we're going to go with drama/disaster and go back to 1970 for Airport. This was a biggie. I mean, this was a major deal. IMDb says, a bomber on board an airplane, an airport almost closed by snow, and various personal problems of the people involved, end quote. Airport was the first of many all-star disaster movies. That will be an upcoming episode at some point. And arguably the best of the bunch. Nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, winner of one Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, Helen Hayes, and the cast is a who's who of 70s stars. Jacqueline Bisset, George Kennedy, Maureen Stapleton, Dean Martin, Burt Lancaster, fantastic. I actually thought Lee Grant was in this one as well, but that was Airport 77. It's not like I bought every Airport movie on DVD. Some of it may seem dated. It is 54 years old now, but it's still a taut thriller with some very tense moments. It's melodramatic, to be sure, but the melodrama is extremely enjoyable. The music is also tremendous. It's one of the first films to ever gross over $100 million, which is why there were 3 sequels, including the one where the stewardess is flying the plane. Now that I think of it, Airport and Airplane would also be a great double feature. Next, drama/regular, The Aviator from 2004. IMDb says, a biopic depicting the early years of legendary director and aviator Howard Hughes' career from the late 1920s to the mid-1940s. The Aviator was nominated for 11 Oscars and won 5, including film editing, cinematography, and Best Supporting Actress, the wonderful Cate Blanchett. Howard Hughes was an interesting person, to say the least, and Leonardo DiCaprio does a good job capturing that complicated persona. I go back and forth on Leo, but this was a solid performance. If you haven't seen The Aviator, I definitely recommend it. There are worse movies out there made by Scorsese. Well, I mean much worse. The Irishman, The Departed. Next, from 2012, Flight. Some of these airplane movies take place almost entirely aboard the airplanes, while others could be considered airplane movie adjacent. Flight would be one of the latter. IMDb says, troubling questions arise after an airline pilot, Whip Whitaker, makes a miracle landing after a mid-air catastrophe. The pilot is played by the phenomenal Denzel Washington, which automatically makes this film worth watching. Washington earned a Best Actor Oscar nomination for Flight, which was also nominated for Best Original Screenplay. It may not accurately portray the physics of flying an airplane, but many alcoholics said it very accurately portrays addiction. The flight sequences are thrilling, the courtroom scenes are compelling, and Washington delivers as he always does. Catch this flight. Wow, that was corny. That was terrible. Next, we're going to move on to thrillers. And we've got a couple of films made in 2005, beginning with Flight Plan. Adding Denzel Washington to a film elevates it to another level, as I've just mentioned. The same is true for Jodie Foster. There are a few holes in this Flight Plan, but Foster's performance makes you forget about a majority of them. IMDb tells us a bereaved woman and her daughter are flying home from Berlin to America. At 30,000 feet, the child vanishes, and nobody will admit she was ever on the plane. Now, I'm a fan of paranoia thrillers where the main character is thought to be deranged because no one believes their story. There are some really nice twists and turns along the way, although the bad guy is, I think, telegraphed by the casting of the part. I looked past that and concentrated on Foster's performance as a desperate mother looking for her daughter nobody believes even exists. Next, Red Eye, also from 2005. We're going to begin with IMDb. A woman is kidnapped by a stranger on a routine flight. Threatened by the potential murder of her father, she is pulled into a plot to assist her captor in a political assassination. We love political assassination movies here at Cinema Wellman. We also love Rachel McAdams. Wes Craven directs what seemingly begins as a romantic drama comedy before transforming into a thriller and ending up as a straight-up horror movie. I'm always intrigued by movies that do this. It doesn't always work, of course, but I appreciate the effort. Oscar winner Cillian Murphy is deliciously evil after appearing to be a sweet guy at the start. Both Red Eye and Flight Plan were made in 2005, as I mentioned, and they're both quite entertaining and would make a fun double feature. I did just that on Sunday night. Now, please extinguish all smoking materials and return your tray tables to their upright position, as this is a wrap from here at Cinema Wellman and Wellman Airlines. Thank you for flying with us, and we hope you're aboard next week as we take a look at the best and worst films screened here during the month of April. Until then, take care.